Thank you to everyone who's joining us in our panel today. We're super excited to be here and share some of our insights and advice with you all. As I'm sure you already know, we've assembled a pretty awesome group of people who can talk intelligently about each of their areas, and so I'm just really excited to see what sort of details and insights they have to share with us. To get things started, a couple things I just want to quickly note is, there's a little bit of a Q&A and chat feature included with Zoom. If anybody in the audience has questions for the panel, please feel free to type those in there, and then Sam and I will try to address those as time permits. What we're going to do in terms of format is Sam and I will get us kicked off, and then we'll give each of our panelists an opportunity to talk about the impact of COVID on their industries, as well as what the next 6 to 12 months might look like for them. And then once we get through each of our panelists there, we'll go on to a Q&A portion where we have a series of questions ready for them. But if you have questions, let us know, and we'll try to address those too. So with that, Sam, do you want to get us started?
Sure. So I'm really excited about this, and Nate and I had talked about it about a month ago, probably, if not a little bit more. There's a lot of uncertainty with the job market, and of course it's very difficult to give everyone all the information because a lot of it's just not out there, and so it's very, very difficult. I graduated around the time of the last recession, and as a student it was difficult because I didn't know what I was walking into. And so in that conversation with Nate, I'm hoping that we can today provide a little bit of clarity on at least, what, from a realistic perspective, what does the job market look like? Where are some of the jobs, and maybe where are areas that are maybe just not hiring, or there might be some issues due to COVID. So that's what I hope we'll get out of this. I'm really excited to see what everyone has to say today. And as Nate said, there's the option to submit questions if anyone has any. And with that, that's really all I have. And I'm excited to see how this goes.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to build upon that. So working in the EW Career Center, of course, we have a lot of interactions for my role as employer relations manager with the community, but of course with our students as well. And it goes without saying that there is just a tremendous amount of uncertainty right now. It was super painful for us, at least, to watch a lot of internships get canceled, and perhaps full-time job offers that had been extended to, be taken back just because of the impact of this pandemic. And so we're definitely feeling that with everybody. So, I'm hoping that today we can alleviate some of that uncertainty, answer some of your questions, and hopefully help you keep moving forward with your career goals. All right, so I think with that, let's go ahead and move on to our panelists, why everybody's here. So we're just going to kind of go in order here. Let's go ahead and start with banking. We have with us Millie Harding. Millie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Millie Harding, much like Nate just said, and I work for Washington Trust Bank. I'm an HR business partner there and have been in human resources for about, 7 or 8 years, but fairly new to banking. Spent a lot of my career in the hospitality industry, and I'm from Spokane, but moved away, came back, and now I'm at Washington Trust. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Millie. Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and just address the 2 questions as well about the impact and then what the future might look like, and then we'll just kind of go panelist to panelist from there.
Sure, absolutely. Disclaimer that I want to throw out there, I am working from home, as I'm sure many of us are, so you may hear some barking in the background, and I apologize about that ahead of time. I've got a puppy at home, and that's been fun, is probably, and interesting are the 2 words I would choose if I had to select 2 to define my experience working from home with a 6-month-old puppy. But let's dive a little bit deeper into, how banking and the financial services industry has been impacted by the pandemic, or this crisis, so to speak, and what that 6 to 12 month outlook might look like. And, really, I think that the financial service industry, or banking, so to speak, has, fared much better than other industries in the United States as a whole, especially as it relates to job losses or job retention, so to speak. Our Chief Investment Officer and economist, Steve Scranton, has week by week done a lot of analysis on our industry in the United States and in Spokane specifically, because I think that sometimes we see different data between those two pieces. The financial industry in the United States shows that about 2.7% of its jobs since February of 2020 have been lost. But Spokane specifically, it's pretty interesting. I think we see that some of those jobs were definitely lost initially after February and specifically March, I think, hit with COVID, pandemic, crisis, all those pieces. But we've recovered almost all of those jobs since then. And so certainly more stable, I would say, than other particular industries that you've seen some turmoil in when it comes to the job market. I think that another piece to touch on is that, we've, unlike maybe 2008 and 2009, the financial services industry has been somewhat of a source of strength. I mean, you see the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP program, come forward and really play a huge integral role in supporting small businesses in our communities through loans, through forbearance requests, and really help continue to keep people employed with those small businesses to make sure that they have money to take home and spend and keep our economy going, and jobs that, potentially they would have been laid off from or, furloughed from. I think, some other changes that we've seen based off of how our industry has been impacted is, our teams are moving remote, right? And maybe folks that used to be comfortable walking into branches and depositing their paycheck every 2 weeks, that's totally been changed. And so, a lot of our teams are remote. I think that you see that we have higher call volumes and a lot more traffic going to our website as far as online banking goes. Certainly we're making accommodations for people to come in our branches, either, whether that's appointment only or, you see the line of cars in our drive-through branches for them to still have that interaction and be able to take care of things. Some of our teams have, still remained on site because business still needs to go on as usual. We still have, customers to take care of. So things like, our wires desk and our team that helps move money, across the world to help companies still remain operating and connect with their customers has been, something that we've been keeping on site to make sure that we're taking care of people. But a lot of our functions, I mean, certainly IT, accounting, finance, like HR, for example, marketing, have all been shifted to more remote work. So it's been interesting to see how that's been an adjustment for us. I think another thing to mention as far as industry impact goes is, much like I said earlier, because we maybe weren't a key contributor to the financial crisis or any sort of impact to the economy, such as 2008, 2009, we were, I think we are, certainly a lot more stable, and that puts us in a good position over the next 6 to 12 months, I think, moving forward. Some other things I think to mention are just, prior to pandemic, pre-COVID, pre-crisis, in our industry in general, you saw that there was a shift in how people preferred to perform their banking, their preferences, right? I mean, I think the younger generation comes in and they want to pick up their phone, much like I do, and transfer money and be able to see everything that minute. It's a lot more on demand. And, many of our older generation customers, they want that face-to-face customer interaction. And so as we were sort of transitioning, and the industry in general was transitioning to more of that mobile model, so to speak, right? How can you access all of that information and still provide excellent customer service while, taking care of your customer online has just been accelerated, I think, now that we are in this pandemic, because many people aren't going to continue to operate face-to-face, and maybe they don't feel comfortable. So how do we still get to them and make sure that we're taking care of them, but either over the phone or online? That's definitely been a shift. I think that another thing that we're seeing as far as our industry goes and what that will look like over the next 6 to 12 months is, we will be challenged by a low interest rate environment. You've seen it's a great time to buy a house, especially in Spokane, if you can find one quick enough, right? Because interest rates are super low. And so that will definitely have an impact on the banking industry. And I think what you'll see is that smaller community banks or credit unions may begin to merge with larger banks or credit unions because it's going to be difficult to maintain that revenue. Many of those banks, their main source of revenue is interest that comes from loans. And as those existing loans, continue to move forward and expire or get paid off, all of these new loans that have come in based off of these low interest rates are coming in at a lower rate, and they're not making as much money. And so I think you'll see probably some change or some movement there. Regional banks that have other services that they perform that are more of a non-interest source of revenue or a fixed cost, similar to Washington Trust Bank, you'll see that they'll be able to weather the storm a little bit better because they're not solely dependent on that interest-based model, which I think will be challenging as we see these rates continue to be very, very low. Lastly, the thing that I would share is, Washington Trust Bank is just like any other company, right? We face the same challenges that many do when it comes to, our workspace, and how do we make sure that when we bring people back to the workspace that they are socially distant, or that we are taking into consideration all of these workplace safety requirements that are going to come into play and probably be very costly when you think about, square footage and bringing people back on site, now needing to take into consideration distancing. So maybe on a floor in Washington Trust Bank, we could fit, 50 people used to work on that floor, but now maybe we need to look at it and truly only 25 or 20 people can work on that floor successfully with these workplace safety standards that we need to meet and make sure that we're taking into consideration to protect everybody's health and safety when they return. And so those are going to be additional expenses we'll see, I think, moving forward. So just some interesting changes, I think, in general that maybe we haven't had to think about before. Some of them are going to be similar to other industries. Some of them will be very specific to banking and financial services. Overall, generally speaking, I think that, banks are very well situated, and I know we'll get into this later, but with some of the questions, but, I think from a job perspective, Washington Trust Bank and our industry in general, it's reflected in those numbers for Spokane. We haven't had a lot of, we've recovered, right? And we haven't continued to lose a lot of jobs in that industry. And I see that in our recruitment, never once did we stop recruiting. We're still continuing to look for new talent. And I think now we're in a position where we're probably able to be a little bit more selective with who we're asking to join our team, because there's so many applicants out there due to, other industries and job loss and coming out of school and not having maybe the same footing that you would have even a year ago. So I think that's sort of in a nutshell what we're seeing right now in financial services or banking. So yeah, excited to answer more questions later on and dive a little bit deeper into that. But I think from a 10,000-foot view, that's what we see.
Awesome. Thank you, Millie. I want to note, I appreciate you bringing up the differences between this crisis and what we saw during the last financial crisis and how that relates to banking, and and how I think that you're filling more of that supportive role and coming to this with strength. And, I want to echo that, because Washington Trust Bank has always been a great partner with Eastern Washington University, especially the Career Center. And recently we talked with some of your leadership, and I just want to tell them how much we appreciate that continued support, because despite all of the challenges and everything going on, your team has been nothing but supportive and asking, okay, well, what can we do to help your students and, help your team get the job done. So that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Of course. All right, well, thank you, Millie. How about we go to Suzanne Schmidt. She is with Associated Builders and Contractors. Would you like to introduce yourself and then talk about our first couple of questions?
Sure. So as Nate said, I'm Suzanne Schmidt, and I'm Associated Builders and Contractors is, there's associations of all kinds of different trades. And so a lot of people aren't real familiar with what an association is, but it's basically a group of like industry members. So we have, our association is made up of new construction, private, or private new construction. So what that means is we're building things like hotels, retail stores, grocery stores, doctor's office, things like that. So, I mean, we do have members that are working on schools and roads and some of those projects, which would be public, but for the most part, our members are doing private projects. So that's going to be very dependent on the economy and how spending is going and those kinds of things, and just the boom of the area. So when, before COVID, this January, I would tell you that my members, what they would say to me, and most of them are they're either general contractors or specialty contractors. But what, their biggest fear in January was, how am I going to get all of the work that I have on the books done? How am I going to get this done? How am I going to have the workforce? So basically they were booming. Everybody had more work than they could actually perform. This was in January. So then we go into February in COVID, and COVID shut us down. So when the governor shut down the state, he shut down commercial construction or private commercial construction as non-essential. So for about 3 weeks, myself and other organizations like the Spokane Home Builders, the Associated General Contractors, other associations were working diligently around the clock trying to get the governor to open up private construction, to let those folks go back to work. The concerns were, of course, were safety, and how could we provide safety at the work site, and social distance and those types of things. So we went through, there was actually a 30-point plan that the governor and his roundtable came back to us and said, can you follow all of these requirements? And yes, we can. It's more costly, it slows jobs down, but yes, absolutely, we can do that. So we were able to, the end of April, go back to work. Actually, phase 1 was the first part of April, then phase 2 that included all construction happened in the end of April. So we were shut down for about a month. Now, as we've been able to go back into phase 2, and even though we've put all of these safety measures in place, it's booming. The construction industry at this point in time is booming. I reached out prior to this panel to my board of directors, and the majority of them are general contractors, and asked them, how do you see things this year and going into 2021? And they have, again, those projects that they had before COVID are still there. They have work on the books for 2021. So kind of going back to Millie, what they're thinking about right now or looking at right now is, okay, we still have those projects on the books. They're still look like they're going to move forward, but are we going to have that? Are we going to have that financial funding and, the investment side of it, people paying for those projects to be completed? Right now, we don't see any banks tightening up, and we do have member banks. In fact, Washington Trust is a member of our association, but we don't have any member banks reporting back to me at this point in time that they're tightening up lending, but that is something that we look at. So that's how we would look at work for 2021. We have the work on the books, the projects are there, they've been awarded, the contractors are lined up to get the work done, but we don't know, that's where we don't know what's the financial situation going to look at. And as Millie was saying, I think that banks are so much stronger now than they were in the recession of 2008 and 2009. And so they learned, or 2008, 2009, they learned from some of those mistakes. And so they're in a better position financially, which is good really for all industries, for sure for the construction industry, because that's what hit us so hard last time was we had the recession, plus it took so long to get things back up really until 2015, because the financial institutions were timid. They were building up themselves, they were rebuilding and getting kind of their coffers in place and their investment portfolios so that they could start lending again. So we're in a better place because of the banks and what happened in 2008 and 2009. So what I would say, the couple of questions is that's how it affected us. It shut us down, but we're back to work. We're back to work busy as we were before the COVID shut down. Things are again, slower because we do have safety regulations. So we had, you know, some of the regulations are how many people can you have on the job site at the same time. So now scheduling those trades, like having the electricians and the carpenters and the HVAC, that all has to be scheduled in intervals, so they're not there on top of each other. And so that's, like, again, slows things down, and that's part of it. But what, you know, my members are telling me is they are, you know, they're hiring, they're definitely hiring, that it is a thriving industry, and you know, the work is there, at least for the foreseeable near future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suzanne. I want to say too, it's really good to hear that that industry continues to grow and move forward. You know, in my opinion, I've always seen construction as one of those indicators, which we'll talk about indicators later in our questions, but that the economy is, you know, starting to improve, even though things are bad. I feel like as long as people are willing to invest and build and continue to grow in that way, at least it shows that there is some sort of optimism in the outlook. So that's promising. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So why don't we go ahead? We'll move on to our next panelist, representing manufacturing. We have Wade Lawson from Wagstaff with us. Just a quick caveat. Obviously, manufacturing is an enormous industry. It is very broad. So Wade has graciously agreed to do his best to discuss manufacturing broadly. But just keep in mind that to discuss the full scope of manufacturing could be somewhat difficult. So Wade, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and address those first couple of questions?
You bet, and you're correct. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but we'll talk about it in general. It's definitely broad. Sorry for the lack of video. It's apparently got its own challenges. Let's talk about the impact of COVID. The impact is mixed, and so what we find is kind of depends on which area of manufacturing that we're in. In our arena, for example, we're a global manufacturer, and we're in the aluminum industry. And so, from a global manufacturing perspective, in a product that where we have long-term sales, our sales go out a year to a year and a half, and so the immediacy of the impact really wasn't felt. Right, the pandemic is announced, and we come to work, and we still have the same products that we're working on. The next day, the next week, the next month. It's just fine. Our impact isn't felt until weeks and months later. But looking at the trajectory ahead, and we see the impact. Others in the consumable realm of COVID, right? They start to see the impact immediately when things start to retract and everybody panics, and then all of a sudden, boom, we don't have some of the consumables that we're using immediately. So it depends on which manufacturing that we're talking about. So in some cases we were doing fine. We kept our doors open because we're considered an essential business. Where other manufacturers, they're producing if they're producing things like food, they're producing things for the Department of Defense, they're producing something for transportation, they can keep their doors open just fine and keep going. And so their impact was nominal immediately while they could figure it out as the doors remained open. In other cases, if they weren't considered essential, then they had to close the doors and then figure out which way was up. So it was a mixed bag, to your point, Nate, that the manufacturing was different. But in terms of the overall impact, in terms of employment, some of us, we have a delayed impact. And so we're seeing the results on the international business somewhat retracting as we're closing borders. We're making it a little tougher to get some things into the United States and going out of the United States. And so those of us who are in international trade, it's making it a little bit more challenging. And for those who are in the domestic United States, they're having a little bit of challenge too. But again, in some cases, if you have consumables, for example, if you're making masks, business is booming. Things are great. If you're into making respirators, hey, there was a two-month window of period and things were fantastic. And so manufacturing, it depends. And so there are ups and downs. For those who are in consumable goods, it's great. But then we get into some other challenges. We start talking about working from home. You can't exactly haul a CNC machine or a welder home with you and work from home. It doesn't work that way. So at the same time, we have a group of engineers, and we can send the engineers home and work from home. So we have a 30% of our workforce that we could send home and work from home, And, you know, the others who we had to coordinate and make sure that they're safe because they do have to come to work. Whether we like it or not, that we have to, and we have to abide by the laws. So those became a challenge of who gets to and who doesn't get to. And, you know, in some cases, do they want to work from home or not want to work from home? It was a fine balance. So now it comes to where we're at today with the mask wearing, right? Where it's a mandatory mask wearing. And some people see it as it's a political thing. Others see it as they don't want to be here and even breathe the air. And we're going through those challenges of is mask PPE, personal protective equipment, you know, because L&I is starting to make threats there, but they haven't necessarily cracked down with fines yet. And so we have that side of it, but are we willing to discipline for not wearing masks? We have had a situation where someone all out refused and said, I'm not wearing a mask. And you know what? We fired for that. But at the same time, are we willing to crack down? Because, you know, we have a lot of well-protected chins around here, you know, and so we have some of these challenges with COVID. So it's a long road ahead, but I mean, these are some of the things in a manufacturing environment, but that's just how manufacturing is. So that's a longer spread, but the short answer is it depends. It really depends. You know, we've talked about pandemic in the world of HR as a caveat. It's been written into every single one of our employment laws. It's been in there, but we haven't faced it for 100 years. So that's been that's been a few lifetimes ago. And now that we're in one, what we realize is we have no freaking idea how to deal with it. And so we're making up the rules as we go along. So it's fantastic. So looking ahead, you know, what's the next 6 to 12 months? And this was funny because I was looking up some articles for a different award, you know, that we were applying for, and I came across a newspaper article that I was quoted in back in March, and it was at the start of the pandemic, and the newspaper article came from the Spokesman Review, and nobody would talk, right? Nobody wanted to go on record for what they were doing. But I said, yeah, no, I'll talk, not a problem. And they said, so what do you think? Do you think we're going to get through this? Are we going to be okay? And I said, yeah, this thing's going to be here for a while. Well, like what? Do you think it's going to be all the way through May? It's like, I think we're going to
is not necessarily immune to a lot of the job loss that we've seen, especially over the last few months, starting in February, all the way up until more recently. I think there's a couple of my colleagues on that drew some parallels between the last economic recession and the economic situation that we're seeing now. And typically the healthcare sector is sort of almost immune, or was immune back in 2008 when we started seeing these job losses. I think it's important to notice that this economic downturn is as a consequence of a pandemic. So because of that, healthcare workforce is directly being influenced. And the way that this happened is the healthcare sector and the delivery of care had to change significantly. There was a lot of adjustments that the operations had to make in order to save resources, really care for the patients that were at most need. So a lot of the elective surgeries or elective procedures were paused, and that's where we saw a lot of the jobs being kind of postponed or being held off. So I'm happy to talk more about what that means if you are interested in a career in healthcare. In terms of what are we looking at in the next 6 to 12 months, again, it's really hard to say. It's fair to say that we are going to see a lot more telehealth interactions with providers, with patients. And I think the one thing that we always have to be mindful of is how are we making sure that this is still equitable for folks that may not have access to a computer or internet. So there's a lot that we're going to have to work toward if that is kind of the direction that we're taking. I think there's also going to be a big focus on key skills if you want to be a frontline clinician. So there's a need for clinicians to be able to understand how to communicate with patients that may have experienced trauma, or how to have those conversations with different members of the patient care team so that we can focus on providing care to a patient in a holistic way and not just focus on their disease, but really think about the patient as a whole. I think that has caught a lot of traction pre-COVID, and there's going to be a lot more of that in the next 6 to 12 months. I wish I had a magic ball and be able to predict when COVID will kind of feel that it's more in control in terms of the infection rate, but I don't. I think a lot of articles that I've read and a lot of experts that I have been in contact with have informed me that we're likely to see COVID up until the end of the year. Some say beyond that. So I think that it'll be really interesting to see what are some of those changes that we're expecting, and how can we get ahead of those changes, especially for folks that are wanting to join the healthcare field.
So much, Stephania. I think that's really helpful, and it's been, you know, I'll just to be honest with everybody, my wife and I, we had a daughter right at the beginning of this whole thing, and so just to see the impact on healthcare during that whole process was really interesting. You know, it's some things that you wouldn't think you'd have to experience, especially you know, interacting with the healthcare industry, but there's certainly a lot of unique challenges there that we can all appreciate.
Absolutely.
Yep. So Wade, were you able to join us again? All right, looks like we're still trying to get him back on the panel. So why don't we go ahead and do this? I want to go ahead and mention we had lined up a panelist to speak on behalf of hospitality, Melissa Huggins. She's the executive director for Spokane Arts, and she was just going to talk about arts and what the impact has been, especially in the Spokane region, and what that means, same as our other panelists have. Unfortunately, she had a personal matter come up and had to step away and isn't able to participate, obviously. But what I plan to do is, along with all the other panelists' contact information, I'll be putting those details in our chat box along with Melissa's. So if there are specific questions that you were hoping to ask her, feel free to reach out. She said that that's okay. Just know it might be a little bit delayed as she's dealing with that personal matter. So why don't we go ahead and do this? Again, want to keep being mindful of everybody's time. As soon as Wade comes back on, we'll give him an opportunity to finish what he was sharing with everybody. But until we get there, why don't we just go ahead and start with our questions for the panel? The first one we have is, we all think we have an idea of which jobs or roles are in demand. How has that changed during the pandemic, and which roles your industry needs? So, you know, what jobs might have been hot a few months ago and, you know, and much needed, but now maybe that's shifted in some way. Why don't we go ahead and start with Stephania?
Sure, happy to take that on. I mean, I think it's no secret that the key thing that we need is frontline clinicians, and this could be nurses, PAs, doctors, anyone who is able to provide patient care. I think we've seen a gap across the nation in healthcare shortages. We see it more in some areas versus others. And I think with the pandemic, that's just going to widen the gap even more. I think some older physicians, for example, may want to retire rather than practice in a COVID environment. So that, again, leaves a much wider gap. And there's statistics really across the board in terms of frontline clinicians and the shortage. Just to give you an idea, the the Academy of Medical Colleges is projecting that there's going to be an even greater gap in physicians that is going to be needed in the next couple of years. So it doesn't just mean physicians are the hot role right now. It's really anyone who is a frontline clinician. And I think that it's a tough decision, because once you decide, it's like many other careers, you kind of dedicate your life to that sector. And I think what's important is for our students and for our career changers that are interested in these positions to really think through how to get the right exposure to be able to validate that that is a career path. And And, I'm happy to talk through some of the suggestions later on, but I would say definitely in demand are going to be your frontline clinicians that are going to be providing direct care to patients.
Awesome, thank you. Millie, would you like to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. I think that, maybe unlike Stephania's experience, we've seen some positions become more in demand, so to speak, but a lot of our business is almost business as usual. I think we continue to see growth. And since there is so much stability in the financial services and banking industry right now, it feels, for the most part, like we're still proceeding with hiring and adding, new hires to our team in the same capacity that we may have seen had we not been amidst COVID. I mean, perhaps some of those pieces are more accelerated. I think we see, a larger demand for people to join our team in, our, what we call our priority service center. So, people that are going to be help fielding those phone calls and helping, navigate concerns or issues or questions with customers, but more in that virtual capacity. So either over the phone or through chat. So that's been something that has definitely felt top of mind, because obviously we're seeing a larger influx of queries that way versus people walking into a branch. I think that we definitely have seen some ripple effects come from that paycheck protection program, right? So that's kind of been an all hands on deck piece, because financial institutions had the decision of whether or not they would like to participate in that program with the government. And so since Washington Trust Bank was one that decided to do so, we've seen a large amount of workload come from that, specifically in, the capacity of our relationship managers, our small business relationship managers, our commercial relationship managers, those people that are building relationships and are really at the front and center of many of these small businesses' relationships with banking are, have seen, I would say, an increase in workload. And I definitely foresee that being a space that we continue to grow and expand in our industry as we continue to grow and expand as a bank. We've certainly captured quite a few more customers through this paycheck protection program piece. And so I anticipate that that is something that will grow as a result of that. And then, that just sort of is a trickle down effect, right? Then you see more support and what I would consider like operational support that's going to be probably needed as a result of that, because, as you continue to grow relationships and we continue to bring more business to the bank, there's those support and those operational roles that also need to be increased in order to support that volume that comes through. But I would say, generally speaking, we've been in a very a pretty positive spot, I would say, because, we've been continuing to grow as an organization. The Paycheck Protection Program certainly accelerated that pretty significantly. And now we are seeing that, opportunities and positions that we were imagining we would be filling here, over the next few months, years, et cetera, that's been accelerated. And it's been an exciting time. It's been a nice position to be in, as far as, feeling like we're able to employ people when maybe they haven't had that, that's not how they left their last job, or they haven't had, been able to depend on a paycheck, or, been in a spot where that's something that's been a steady component of their life for the past, few months, right? So it's been a nice spot to be in, but I think, we'll just continue to see that growth factor with those banks that are going to, weather the storm, so to speak, when it comes to lasting this crisis or this pandemic. So that's how it feels, I think, right now for Washington Trust Bank, and probably what we'll see at a larger level with banking.
Very good, thank you, Millie. Suzanne, would you like to offer any insight on that?
Just had to unmute first. Yeah, so, much like what Millie said, we really haven't seen a difference because, like, when we were shut down for a few weeks, but as soon as the construction industry was back at work, things were very, very busy. And again, there's, they have work on the books, things that need to get done this year, and then things for next year. But, some of the positions that we are seeing are, that there's a high demand, but we knew, and I again, what Millie's saying is we saw an acceleration because of that. We knew that this was, in the trades, because we had, people at the level of ready to retire or close to the retirement age. So we already knew that there was going to be what we call a crisis in the workforce in the trades industry. That seems to be accelerated. So that's a very hot. So when you ask like, what's the job in demand, what's really hot, really those trades. And I'm talking electricians, carpenters, HVAC, service techs, fire alarm installation, things like that. So all of those type positions are really hot jobs in demand at this point in time. But again, with that, we have then administrative or the overhead that comes along with that. So now we're looking at project managers, project engineers, construction managers, safety. So safety is a big thing. I know Stephania talked about that as, bringing people back and making sure that we have safety in the workplace and the different processes and procedures that we need to go through. And so that's really built a demand for more safety professionals. The safety professionals that are out here right now in the industry are working round the clock to try to keep up and to keep things going and putting those safety plans together and training employees at the job sites. And so that's, those type jobs are in demand, in addition to the other administrative jobs that we have, because there's HR jobs in construction, there's accounting. The accounting is very diverse. We have anywhere from accounting could be a controller, it could be somebody that does payroll. Payroll in the construction industry is very complex. We have prevailing wage, we have job costing. So all of those jobs that support the actual project being built are also in high demand, because that's what happens once you have that work out in the field. The support work in the office then becomes, a greater need as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Right. Nate, I'm back.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know. It gave me the boot and then boom, I was gone. So
welcome back to the fold, Wade. Sorry for the technical glitch there.
Hey, that's okay. But I can do a little bit of the back question and go into this next question as well, kind of tie it all in.
Yes, please do. Please do. Yes.
The previous question was, what does it look like in the next 6 to 12 months, and then tying it into where we're at today. I think it all kind of blends in because, that 6 to 12 months depends on which portion of manufacturing that we're in. Some places have had to do layoffs right away just to survive. Others are kind of a delayed factor. They tried, they use some of the PPP money to stretch it out because they thought that this thing was going to be just in and out and done in a few weeks. And I think we've all recognized that that's not the case. And so they've had some delayed responses. Other places have tried to use furloughs and some other things to kind of stretch it out, but others have gotten a little bit smart with how they're doing it. But one thing that I have recognized is, and to the point on the skilled trades, some positions we still have need for these skilled positions. Even as companies shrink and companies right size moving forward, manufacturing still has to happen. We still have to make stuff. We will always need to make stuff. Companies may come and go, but we will always need to make stuff because people will always buy stuff. And just what is being made and bought may differ, but we will also always going to need to fix stuff, buy it, and move stuff. So to that point, some of our future challenges that we'll have the workforce challenge, and then we'll have the future needs challenge. Dealing with things in the future, we are dealing with paid time off issues because we have some things to make sure people are taken care of, and dealing with the sicknesses, illnesses, and people working with kids at home as we're figuring out school. But working from home, we're going to have to, that's going to be a permanent thing moving forward. We not only recognize that people like it, but we recognize that a lot of these engineers and folks, some of them do a lot better working from home than they do coming to work each day. Keeping them, giving them the peace and quiet to stay at home, and then integrate some of these teams and other technologies to work at a distance. They actually produce more by getting them out of the office than they do being in the office. I think market demand is going to create a lot of variation depending upon which area that we're in. But the employee supply, and this goes to what others have said before, 4 months ago, we had a war for talent. where we were just trying to scrape and figure out where we could find the next employee, especially skilled employees. And then the pandemic hits, and then all of a sudden we have this 15% unemployment. If we scrape off the surface, we still have a challenge for finding the talent in these skilled areas. And over the next few months, I think it's going to get worse because we still have people who are retiring. And because of the pandemic, anybody who was on the fence about retiring, they're jumping over the fence and shifting into retirement a little bit faster than they would have if we didn't have the pandemic. So where we were easing into some of these challenges of shortages, I think we actually are going to accelerate that over the next 12 months. So when we're on the backside of this pandemic, for anybody who's looking at, should I go into school? Should I go get some training? Now is the exact time to go get that training. Because over the next 12 months or 18 months, or if you're looking to go into school, now is the precise time to go get that training and go get the skills training so that when you're on the back end of this, you'll be ready to come out and get whatever job you want. In our world, we're talking about welders, we're talking about CNC machinists and machine operators, we're talking about designers. Those are the 2-year degrees or even certificates that you don't need to go to 4-year colleges for. For those who are in the 4-year areas, engineers are engineers, and we will always need engineers. So any of those markets, there was a high demand for them before, and there's still a demand for them, and there's always going to be a demand because the job shortage for those skilled trades is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. 2 years ago, if there wasn't anybody in the entire region who didn't know that Wagstaff was hiring welders, then you were hiding somewhere because we blew it up. So anyway, looking ahead, it still pays for people to look into these things, and it will be profitable. And you don't need a 4-year college degree. There are 2-year degrees and certificate programs that can be lucrative, and these things pay well too. Just talking dollars and cents. You can go to 4-year college. I'm just spelling it out. 4-year college, get the engineering degree, come out with a debt load, and start off at $55,000 as an engineer. Or you can go to community college. You can get that thing paid for if you do it right. You can come out of it debt free. You could be 21 years old, go to work for about 40 grand a year. That's before overtime. With overtime, you're gonna make $45,000 or so, and that's at age 21. 5 years out, you're going to be making the same as that engineer was at about the same age that he'll be coming out of that program with the engineering degree. So, and he's going to have a heavy debt load. So anyway, there are lots of options out there.
All right, thanks, Wade. And we actually had a participant question that I'm just going to go ahead and ask you because I think you've already addressed this a little bit. So I'll just give you an opportunity to go ahead and tackle that. She was asking, because of the uncertainty with COVID, do you expect that there will be in manufacturing, instead of more regular full-time hires for those types of positions, a little bit more temporary or contract work just to ensure that you're not hiring a bunch of new full-time employees and then having to lay them off later if things don't improve?
We're going to do that anyway. That's a norm. And that comes with ebbs and flows. I think we always have our core group of employees. That will always be the case. And anytime that we have ebbs and flows of manufacturing, if we have high demands or periods where we think we're going to have spurts of hires, we're always going to hire temporarily, at least if it's going to be 12 months or less, or even 18 months or less, where we think we're going to have temporary demand. We are almost always going to hire in a temporary capacity. Because then if it lasts longer than that, then we may take some of those temps and do a try before we buy. And if we like them, then we'll just bring them on as full-time.
Okay, sounds good. So I think this next question, I'm actually going to pose this to Millie. I think in terms of remote work, this would be a good question for you, especially. One of the panelists had asked, especially for new graduates, having the remote work environments, I guess some of the concerns that we're seeing with our students is that maybe an employer would be reluctant to hire them for a remote work opportunity just because, as we all know, it takes a little bit of time to build that trust with your employer and to demonstrate that you're able to actually effectively work remotely. So do you think there will be hesitation to hire new graduates for those types of roles? Will there be more of a tendency to, promote within, or, source your own employees for those types of opportunities and maybe hire new graduates for something else?
That's an interesting question. And I actually, in our experience, I think in recruitment over the past few months, I would not say that's true. I think that, students, especially recent students, right, who've had to work virtually and complete their degrees virtually for the past few months may bring more experience to that virtual workability than other candidates, coming from different industries may. I think, we have seen quite a few, external hires join our team that come from all different backgrounds and have all different types of experiences. Yes, some of them have worked for companies where they've worked virtually forever, right? That's just been their norm, and maybe they're better situated because they have a different comfort level with the engagement that's required when you're working at home in your own office without the team interaction. The collaboration piece feels different. That's something they're used to. They might be, the technology component isn't maybe as large of a hurdle, but, I think that what I have seen is that we still continue to look for the best candidate. And oftentimes that means, recent grads certainly fit that criteria, especially depending on what type of, education that they bring to the table, depending on what position we're talking about. I think if anything that they, can display that they have a stronger resilience and adaptability muscle maybe built up over the past few months that they can showcase in their interviews when we're talking about, bringing somebody on in a remote capacity, and talk about, how they maybe transitioned or had part of their school year remote or what that looked like, because, not all applicants have that background experience. And we've seen in this panel that, there are some folks that aren't working remotely because their job won't allow them. And so I think that, if I were a recent grad and I was, had some concerns about maybe not being looked at because of not having that actual on the job experience quite yet, and being worried about, somebody having concerns of onboarding me remotely, I would flip that and use it to my advantage. You've been in school, you've taken online classes, I'm sure, and now even more so. And don't even want to think about having to do a group project remotely in school. There's a lot of things you can pull from and showcase your strengths and talk about why that would be, an asset to the team. So I have not seen that. And I think that if anything, that just makes, folks more marketable when they look for jobs, because they're going to be able to pull from that recent experience that maybe some folks that haven't worked remotely wouldn't be able to pull from.
Excellent, thank you. And, just building off of that, I'm actually going to jump to a question we just had from an attendee, and this relates to one of the questions that we had set aside originally. Stephania, I'm curious if there's anything you would like to say to add on what Millie just offered. But, in regards to with the new remote situation, are there other skill sets, that recruiters may be looking for in new hires that maybe they weren't really looking for previously? And what might we expect in terms of the interview process, and how can people prep for that so that they're successful?
Yeah, sure. So I think one caveat that I'll add is, I think in the healthcare sector, there are opportunities for remote work, but sometimes there's still the opportunity to do in person. So I just wanted to kind of give that caveat. But in terms of, if you're looking for, let's say, a remote patient monitoring role where you're still monitoring a patient, providing care to patients, but in a virtual setting, I really like what Millie said about really leveraging the fact that this is what you're comfortable with, and these are the skills that you bring to the table, and really elevating those. I think we always say there's transferable skills for anything that you do. And, as a personal story, when I was putting myself through college and grad school, I worked at a restaurant. And initially I didn't think that was a great skill, but it really helped me communicate, and it helped me relate to people. And those are skills that I'm using today in a healthcare setting. So I think just really like what you said, Millie, really don't lose track that what you do day to day is actually a great experience, and having having gone through school the last few months remotely, it really prepares you for being able to organize your time and be able to deliver in this environment. And I think the second part to your question, can you repeat that?
Yeah, how this might impact or change, what the recruitment or interview process looks like, and how people can really prepare for that and set themselves apart.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think for our firm, we're doing all of our recruitment on video. So whatever would have been in person is now on Zoom. And I think that the basic guidelines still apply. So, of course, be prepared to speak to who you are. I think that there's a lot of this, a lot of these tips that are never going to go away, right? Be prepared to introduce yourself and why you feel like this environment is the right for you and how you fit into this, this space. One of the questions that I always like to ask when I interview is I try to pull some of the personality out of folks. I think there's already stress of COVID, and there's already so many other factors that are influencing how someone feels. Add the layer of stress of an interview. So I try to ask some questions or try to give folks the opportunity to let their personality shine. So if you're able to do that during an interview, I think that's definitely a bonus for you because they're able to see your personality in a platform that's typically hard to do. So that would be kind of a tip that I would offer. But of course, doing the same type of preparation that you do, if you are going to be, and again, this might kind of be silly, but I do a lot of interviews during the week, and I realize that not everyone might have these suggestions offered to them in the past, but of course, be mindful of what you're wearing, be mindful of your background. If you choose to, wear your slippers, just make sure that they're not visible, and make sure that, you're able to still communicate professionally and really advocate for why you are the best fit for the role. So a lot of the oldies but goodies. So that's what I would have to add.
Perfect. It's so funny you should say that, because I had done a presentation with another employer talking about how to prepare for virtual interviews and put your best foot forward. And so one example she gave about the dress situation was she was interviewing a super stellar student. He had his jacket on, looked really sharp, and then something happened at home and he had to jump up. And when he did, he was wearing gym shorts, and she thought, oh my gosh, So just, like you said, just, make sure that stuff isn't visible and you're ready for it all, because who knows what's going to happen. And
Definitely.
I appreciate you both also bringing up how to think creatively about, what you're doing and what circumstances might be beneficial to this sort of environment, talking about, Millie, the group projects and that sort of thing, because that's something that we struggle with students. They discount so much of their experience and the things that they're doing here on campus. But all of those are definitely transferable skills. And shameless plug for our office, if any students listening or alumni need assistance with that sort of thing, the EW Career Center has some amazing career advisors who will talk to you about all of that and help you, translate those experiences and those skill sets onto your resume so that you can sell yourself to an employer. Susanna and Wade, is there anything you would like to add to what Millie and Stephania have said?
They did a great job with covering those essentials. I think that now, my thing goes back to what I was saying before. Now is the time to prepare. If we're in this COVID state, it's going to be here for a while. It's not going to go away overnight. And the vaccine or not, the vaccine is going to come. But you know what? It's not going to be a snap of the fingers. It's going to be a while to produce 2 billion doses, right? To get around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, the thing's only going to be good for 6 to 8 months, like a flu shot, and then we're going to be back around again. So, and the financial impact of COVID is going to be lasting. We're got to buckle up for another 18 months of bumpiness. Mm-hmm. So this is
scary.
Yeah.
Some gloom. I'm saying,
I wonder
take advantage.
Oh.
Yep.
you know, take advantage, and it's time to prep. And so go find work now, go find it. But if you're looking ahead and saying, should I go back to school? Should I do some things? Yeah, do it. But look, you know, there's some great opportunities. There's some great things that you can go do. The industries are here. There are some great futures ahead.
Thank you, Wade. Suzanne, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, and what Wade was saying is be prepared, but also be prepared to interview on video. So, you know, you can actually do a GoToMeeting or a Zoom meeting and just put yourself on video so that you see what you look like and how you present yourself. I mean, I would definitely practice particular questions that you think you might be asked during that interview, but practice being on video. I know that when I first started doing Zoom meetings, I was pretty distracted by myself, looking at, like, it looked like I was looking out of the corner of my eye, or I was, you know, or what was in my background and those kinds of things. So I would really tell people to prepare themselves by practicing interviewing on video, practice getting used to seeing yourself.
I think that's great advice. And another suggestion that I've often heard is just because it can be distracting, once you feel comfortable with your background and how you look, is just to hide your own image. Right. That way you're not, like I said, distracted and constantly looking at what you look like. Yep. Fantastic. Thank you.
Nate.
Yeah.
I was just wanting to comment on what Wade was saying about just getting yourself prepared. I don't want to go off script too much in terms of the questions that we have, but I just wanted to highlight a point that I think also resonates in the healthcare sector. I think that he mentioned thinking through what's going to prepare you for that next step, and right now being the time to get that sort of skill set or training that you need. And I think there's a lot of programs out there, I'll speak for the healthcare sector, that place you in the environment where you may be interested in working. And this is a lot of what we do right now with Multi-Care, Deaconess, and Valley Hospital. So I'm sure other organizations do something similar, but I would recommend that to stay relevant and to even identify opportunities for employment, if you're still figuring out where you fit in the sector, take this advantage to see what the healthcare field offers, do an internship or do some type of volunteering with the intention of networking for employment, with the intention of building up your skill set. One of the things that I do for my interns is I always encourage them to set up a relationship with people so that they can be able to speak to how can they write in their resume everything that they did during the internship. How can they express, you know, the skills, the tangible skills that they gain from that training program or from that 2-month shadowing experience, so that they can feel more confident and be prepared that they are gaining skills. So I just wanted to echo what Wade was saying. I think the students that we put through our programs and the students that we interact with, that's often what they need to determine, yes, this is the experience that I need to find employment, or, you know what, I just realized healthcare is not for me, let me find something else. And definitely a lot sooner than halfway into medical school or halfway into nursing school. So just wanted to echo that.
Well, I'm glad you did, because it actually leads really well into the next question. So I'm gonna let Millie start us off with this one. Coincidentally, again, one of the participants asked almost exactly the same thing. So we'll just go with our second question on here. What advice would you give to someone that has lost a job or internship but wants to keep building experience and moving their career forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I'm just going to continue to echo what our panelists have already talked about. But I think a couple things come to mind. I think that it's an awesome time to really be open and, like Stephania said, understand what your passion is, and maybe the path there is a little bit different than initially thought, right? You know, we're not in the same environment we were a year ago, so maybe those plans have changed, but be open to different industries. And I know I said this in, you know, my previous answer, but, you know, that resilience and adaptability piece is so huge. And, you know, I know, like for Washington Trust Bank, that's one of our competencies when we're working with our employees, and certainly something that we look at when we're hiring is, what did you do in a situation that you weren't expecting? Or how did you make a bad situation good? How did you come out of that better, stronger? What skills did you gain? Kind of goes back to that, hospitality piece. You learned communication. You probably learned, some professional skills when you were a server or a waiter, Stephania. And those are all things that still are valuable and definitely add value when you're interviewing, because you can speak to these variety of experiences. And I think, being open to those changes, in addition to that continued learning, I think when I think about banking and financial services, those technical certifications, maybe aren't going to be nearly as relevant, but there's certainly a lot of other certifications or webinars or, classes that you can participate in that will help you, stay sharp on those skills. And that relevancy piece will still be current, right? You'll still be able to speak to that in an interview, but I think being open to other industries and continuing to work shows, dedication. It shows you're resilient. It shows you're adaptable. And ultimately, that is somebody that is an attractive candidate from an employer perspective, because certainly we're in a situation where resilience and adaptability is huge, right? I mean, I think about, my work, 1,150 employees, and about 80% of them moved remote in a matter of a few weeks. And that was not something we'd ever done before. So being resilient and adaptable is a huge part of that. And I think that is something that you can certainly speak to in an interview when the right job does come along, and you're able to share, why you decided to take a different job that wasn't initially a part of your career path. When you're in those interviews, you can share those pieces, and that's attractive to employers to see that somebody is not only stepping up and willing to try something new, but grow their strengths in different areas. And that's a well-rounded candidate, in my opinion, is you're able to see, how they've weathered the storm in all of those different areas, and really, shown how adaptable that they are in that environment. So that's really what I would suggest. I mean, obviously, very similar to what Wade said, that continuing education piece is huge if that's an option that's available to you. But if you need to make money and that's not an option, there are other resources and other ways that you can continue to keep yourself valuable to the market that you'd rather be in.
And would you say too, Millie, kind of building on that, is it worthwhile for students to be talking about personal projects, that might be related to the work they want to do when they graduate, or maybe taking a LinkedIn learning course to help them build their skills in Excel and things like that? Would you say those are things that they should definitely highlight when talking to employers?
I definitely think so. I think, if we're speaking specifically about internships, right, and students between, their sophomore and junior year, maybe that's not an option for them anymore. That wasn't an option for them. I think those particular pieces that can show that you're still actively learning and actively pursuing and keeping yourself relevant, keeping your skills sharp are going to be important. Like you said, the example of the LinkedIn learning classes, I think is an awesome tool to use if you're interested in exploring a lot of different things. I think that they have options to explore a lot of different industries, or just get some, quick information bites on Microsoft Excel or things like that are going to be relevant in a lot of different industries. And then, Stephanie had called out volunteering. I think that's something that is really important and can provide a lot of value, because you're going to be able to, continue to show your progression in building those skills and building relationships, especially in the Spokane market. Building relationships is very important, but it's going to be, valuable for you later on to continue building those skills with, however you choose to accomplish it, whether it's LinkedIn learning, whether it's volunteering, whether it's a webinar that you find online. I think, when I think about HR specifically, there's the Society for Human Resources Management. They offer quite a few webinars and discounted certification programs and membership programs for students. And so now is the time to take advantage of those pieces and really immerse yourself, because those are very relevant in, in the workforce now. I mean, I still am actively involved in that, and that would be something that would be relatable and relevant.
Awesome. Thank you, Millie. And Suzanne, to you, I'm curious, because you had talked a little bit about some of the positions that are available now, in terms of maybe some of the more laborer positions. And, I would just say that the majority of our students do work while going to school, and especially seasonally, of course. And so I'm thinking, perhaps getting some of those positions and those opportunities would help them build skills that would then, make them more marketable. Like, say, if you become go through the construction management program.
Oh, absolutely.
And then obviously networking, I think would be very helpful there in that remark. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, and actually that was kind of my, what I guess my take on this question was, if you lost your internship, and I think what both Stephania and Millie said, is be, and Wade also, is be open, and try those different industries. And like you're saying, maybe you're going to be working while you're going to school, but just be open and try those other industries. One of the things that I think would be, is helpful for students to know, for people out there that are listening to know, is that most industries, so whether it's the retail industry or the healthcare industry, the construction industry, they have associations. So an association is a resource where a group of members come together for different activities and training and insurance programs, things like that. So what I would say is, if you're looking at different industries, and maybe you had never considered the construction industry, but you've watched this, this webinar and saying, hey, well, maybe I might want to try that. Where, how do I get a hold of people? How do I know, if they're, because not everybody is recruiting or doing those job fairs. We're not, because we were very active in job fairs. And what I would say is, contact associations. You can Google, the Association of, Healthcare Workers, and find out where your local association is. Give them a call, email them and say, hey, what, I'd really, I haven't worked in the construction industry before, but this is something that is of interest to me, or that I know that your industry is doing well during this time, and maybe I was in the retail industry or the hospitality restaurants. We know that they're all struggling, so maybe that's something that you were working in and now you've been laid off, but that there's other industries that are moving full stream ahead, the banking industry, the healthcare, construction. So if that's, and it's really part of networking, is reach out to those associations and ask them. I know Millie mentioned SHRM too. Reach out and ask, because they're going to know who's hiring. They're going to know what kind of positions are open and what that job market looks like. We do a lot of what we call, workforce development, and really matching up employers with employees. So if you, reached out to us and said, hey, I just graduated with a construction management degree, and I'm looking for an employer, we most likely, we're going to know who is hiring, and we're going to know where we can send you. Or like you said, Nate, if they're, if they're working on a professional career, but they have to work their way through school, so they want to do a labor type position, or carpenter, or, electrical, those are also positions that if you contact an association, most likely we're going to know who's hiring and what positions are available. We keep information, data, like banks do. Our information is, what kind of book, what work is on the books, who's, what projects are going forward. And like you said, right now it looks good for 2021. We're kind of leery about that, because if financing's pulled, then those projects won't move forward. But those are things that I would encourage. If you had a internship that you lost because they, didn't bring people back to work, or because of COVID, look at other industries. Just give them a chance, or give them consideration, and reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add to what Susan just said?
Yep, go ahead.
So I think it's funny, we're all in sync here in terms of our advice and our recommendations. I really liked how you said, be open to other industries. It's a big decision to determine what you're going to do next. So definitely echo that. I think look for training programs, and even if you don't have the capacity to do an internship, or there's no structured internship, still offer your time up, because sometimes folks may not be offering structured internships because they may not have the bandwidth to screen and go through the whole motions. But if you're offering up your time and you're saying this is what you can do and really selling yourself and your skills to a connection that you have, they might likely pull you and kind of do an internship for you on the side. So definitely look for those like custom opportunities and don't hesitate to build those out for yourself. I think once you are in, if you can get yourself into any sort of opportunity, I think the hardest is sometimes to get into the door, but once you're in, that's when you can network and that's when you can spread out and that's when you can really identify what's the best opportunity for you. So I just wanted to echo that because that's definitely something that helped me when I was putting myself through college and through grad school. It was really helpful for me to stay open, and I worked on the side and it wasn't a job that was related to my career, but it gave me the time to also take on a volunteer internship. And, I was making ends meet, but I was also getting experience and staying relevant. So a lot of opportunities that you all might have to customize your way around. And I'm more than happy to talk through this offline with anyone who's interested and anyone who's interested specifically about healthcare and about what opportunities and training programs we offer for those who want to join healthcare.
Awesome, thank you. And actually, I just want to kind of run with that thread a little bit more because I do think that you've already talked about this. So for some of our younger students who are planning to go into an industry that may have been hit hard or changed by the pandemic, should they consider changing their major in an alternative career path?
Yeah, I mean, I think Millie said this, I think it's always important for you to follow your passion and to really identify what are you interested in. And if you don't know what that is, look for other opportunities. But I don't know that I would encourage someone to just, go a totally different direction if their heart and soul is set on a specific career path. So I guess I'm a bit of a romantic in that term, but what I would say though is you do want to make sure that you're giving yourself the space to determine and to explore other career paths. I've had multiple conversations with college students that come to me and say, I want to join this program that you're offering because I want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, and they're so set on it. And I ask them questions like, well, how did you come about this? And oftentimes it's just the first thing that they grab onto from the media, and it's very prestigious. And a lot of times they don't understand what that even means. So it's good to give yourself the space to think about opportunities and explore other options. But if at the end of the day, your heart still lies on, healthcare or another industry, then I would recommend, you pursue whatever that is that will make you happy. I don't know if others have a different take on it. Again, I'm a bit of a romantic in that sense, but that's what I would offer.
Perfect. Thank you so much. No, I think that's great. Is there anything else that would anybody else like to add anything to that, or?
I would agree. I think if you're passionate about something, it's very, especially depending on how early of a student we're talking about, if this is somebody's freshman year, it's going to be very challenging to understand what 4 years from now, 2 years from now, next week, what it even looks like, right? I mean, I think that we're sort of in an ever evolving, ever changing environment. And what we do know is that we don't know a lot about COVID and how that eventual ripple effect or change pattern will continue to grow and impact industries or not impact industries. And so I think that it would be very, one of the panelists said this, I wish we had a crystal ball, but we don't. And so it's going to be challenging to try to navigate right in this moment what we think will be beneficial or what will be super valuable or the hot next job in 4 years. So I think that it's important that you follow your passion and go forward with what's important to you and what you've set out to do. Of course, always be open to different opportunities, different learning opportunities, continue to keep yourself sharp and valuable. But I think, so much is unknown that it would be challenging to try to navigate what 4 years, 2 years from now even looks like to modify your approach now.
I think that's great advice, Millie. Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left. I was really hoping, I wish I had another 2 hours with you all because I have a million more questions, as does everyone else, I'm sure. But I'm hoping we can sort of end this on a positive note. And so I'm wondering, we keep hearing a lot about the negative impact of the pandemic and all the bad and terrible things that are taking place. Have you noticed anything positive as a result of all these changes in the shifting work environment? Would anybody like to offer up something positive that they've noticed?
Well, I'll go first.
Yeah, Wade.
Fewer meetings and they're faster. And I will keep that as a standard moving forward. Amen.
Very good. Couldn't agree more, Wade.
I can chime in, and I think I alluded to this in my introduction. I think right now in the healthcare sector, we're seeing a beautiful blend between public health and medicine. I think these are two sectors that are often at odds. So medicine being more focused on taking care of a disease, and public health being more focused on how do you prevent that disease in the first place. And I think right now there's a lot of collaboration, the whole masking 6 feet apart, that's all public health prevention 101. And it's just been, as a public health expert, it's been really great to see this marriage between the two stay close and upfront. One of the other things that also on the same vein that I think is sort of a positive of this is your clinician and whoever's delivering care to patients is now having to think more about the social factors affecting health care outcomes. So again, and this goes back to the difference between public health and medicine. I think when we are taking care of a patient, we have to think of a patient holistically, and we have to acknowledge that their job, where they live, where they interact, they all play a big part of what their health outcomes are going to look like. And now with COVID, we're having to pay close attention to that because of the nature of the disease and the nature of the illness. So from a healthcare perspective, I think those are the two key things that are really great to see during this troubled time. And I'm hoping that collaboration continues to happen and it makes room for a different care delivery model. I think in the past, there's been a lot of conversation of considering population health and what that would look like. And it seems so far-fetched, but I think now with COVID up front and center, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities to really close and narrow the gap between public health and care delivery. So that's one thing that I'll leave you with as a positive note.
Awesome, thank you. Suzanne, anything you'd like to add to that, or?
Yeah, actually, that's what I agree completely with Stephania. We're actually seeing in the construction industry really that same marriage, because we're looking at now we're looking so closely at safety and then the aspects and like you said, the social aspects and people, their home life and who are they, exposed to. And because of that, I see a big movement towards looking at the whole person. And so we're not just looking at, safety in the workplace, but we're looking at safety at home and social elements and mental health elements and healthcare. What kind of healthcare are we providing for our employees, and then do they have like employee assistant programs and things like that. So what I'm seeing, and it's not just at our chapter, so we are a national association, and I'm actually on the National Safety Committee, and so that's something that our safety committee in this last 3 months has really been talking about as a total healthcare initiative for the construction industry. And we're going to be looking at all of those things and being able as employers to support, again, mental health, financial health, providing classes for people, with budgeting and how to make ends meet, those kinds of things that have caused stress and problems for people in the workforce. Now we want to look at their whole health. So that's what I would say is, the best thing that has came out of COVID is that because we've had to look at really providing safety in the workplace and making sure that we're not, public health, looking at, not exposing each other to the virus, that we've now looked at, hey, we need to go a step further and look at what does the whole person look like and how can we support that whole person's health. So I think that's really exciting.
Cool, it really is. And so we're at time, Millie, but is there anything you would like to add or to wrap us up?
I think I certainly echo what Suzanne just shared. And I think, along those lines, it's culture. I mean, I think it's interesting to think about, how many of us experienced the dynamics of working in a large employee population and collaboration and all of those pieces that we thought we might be missing when we all or most of our workforces went remote. And I think, a silver lining that I can pull from our experience at Washington Trust is I think, if there were some concerns about that initially being hard to translate via video or via phone call or via chat, it's certainly been amplified. And, that total, when we're looking at the total person and how we can support them. And, part of that is healthcare. Part of that is, their mental well-being, what information can we give folks to help them be successful in all aspects. I think that culture piece feels stronger than ever. And, that's, I think, a good takeaway for people that are going to be entering the job market in the next few years is that culture piece is still really big. And that's a good takeaway, something to remember when you interview virtually via video, that's going to be something that we talk about and is still a very relevant part of our organization. And, something for you to take away is a research piece, right? What do you value in an organization? What are you looking for? Those things are never changing. They're just delivered virtually now. So that's probably what I would add.
Absolutely. Thank you, Millie. Well, I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here, taking the time to offer your insights and advice. Stephania, Millie, Suzanne, Wade, thank you all so much. To all the attendees, the participants who were listening in on this, we really, really appreciate it. If for whatever reason we weren't able to get to your question, I just put all of our panelists' contact information in the chat box, so please feel free to reach out if there's things that you'd like to follow up with them on. I really hope that we were able to provide a little bit of insight in this time of uncertainty. And I hope to be doing this again. Sam and I think we mentioned this briefly at the beginning. Sam did that. Based upon how this goes and the response from participants, we hope to make this somewhat of a series. So maybe you'll see some of these awesome faces again and get some more great insight. So with that, Sam, anything you want to say to wrap us up?
Nope. I think it was a great event, and I'm really happy, and I'm hoping that we can do this more often. So thanks, Nate, and everybody else.
Yep. Stay tuned. We'll all be chatting soon.
Right.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.